Today, I'll show you how to create and consume a web API in Blazor WebAssembly in .NET 5. So let's get coding. The very first thing that you want to do is create a new project. So open up Visual Studio, create a new project, and this is going to be a Blazor WebAssembly project. Okay, choose this from the recent project templates or search it in the templates bar. Click Next, then give this a name. I'm going to name mine Coffee Picker and select a directory, a location where you want this to be saved, and click Next. And this next screen is very important. So the target framework that I'm choosing is .NET 5. This tutorial is in .NET 5, so feel free to choose whichever one you want, but I'm going to focus on .NET 5 for the purpose of this tutorial. No authentication type, and very important, make sure that you check the ASP.NET Core hosted checkbox option right here, because this is where our API controllers will sit, and click Create. Okay, so as we're here, the next thing that we'll need to do is create a data model, and this is going to be just a simple class that will store our coffee model. It'll have an ID, a title, a description, and the ingredients. A pretty simple one. So if we close out these ones, then we go into the shared Coffee Picker shared project. That's where our business models should sit. And as you can see, the weather forecast sits there as well. So if we go ahead and right click, add, and new class, and I'm just going to call this coffee. Okay, very important. Let's make this public so that it can be accessed from throughout the project, and add a PORP keyword, and then press double tab to have Visual Studio generate this property snippet for you. This will stay as an integer, and this is going to be called ID, and then this is going to be a string, and this is going to hold the title. Yeah. And the next one is still a string, and it's going to be the description. And then the last one is going to be a string array, so an array of strings, yeah, and it's going to hold the ingredients. So very simple, like I said, but the only thing that I would like to do, or the only two things, is add a couple of constructors. So if you type in CTOR, double tab, this is going to generate an empty constructor. And I'm just going to leave this as it is for now, because we need an empty constructor, a parameterless constructor. So I'm going to regenerate a new one. You'll see in a moment why we need this, because we'll new up a coffee object that will not have any of these properties. And then for this one, I'm just going to pre-populate it with the snippet I have. So it'll take in an ID, title, description, and ingredients. So then it will define this class level properties with the ones passed in by the object initializer, so by ourselves from the controller. We'll do that in the next step. So I'm doing this right here. So this signifies this specific class, the ID. So this ID equals to the ID passed in by the controller. I hope all this makes sense. So I'm just repeating this for all the properties. So that's it with this step. Following, we'll set up an API controller for our coffees. And to do that, we will collapse the shared project, expand the coffeepicker.server project, and then in here we've got a folder called controllers. Open it up and right click and go to add, and go to new item, because this is going to be an API controller, specifically an empty one. Yeah, so let's call this coffee controller and hit enter. And as you can see, one is auto-generated for us. One thing that I would like to remove is the API slash path right here. It's just because I don't want to. It's obvious that we're hitting an API. We haven't got any type of any other type of APIs in here. So any other types of controllers. So as you can see, the route is just controller, and this signifies the controller name, meaning the first part of the name before the controller. So to access this, you'll see in the next step when we're going to consume this, we'll just do coffee slash. If you were to call this controller coffee API controller, like such, then you will do coffee API slash and then the name of the endpoint. But for the time being, we're just gonna, or for the entire tutorial, we're just gonna leave this as coffee controller. It will make more sense when we'll get to that step, but I just wanted to walk through this real quick. And obviously, the annotation, that the fact that this is an API controller, so this attribute tells the app that this is an API controller, so it needs to be treated as such. If you do enjoy this tutorial so far, why not hit that like button so that this tutorial can spread out to as many people as possible? I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, following, what we'll need to do is create a simple list of coffees. And to do this, I've got a website that I found, which is sampleapis.com/API list/coffee, and I'll link you up with this particular URL in the description, so you can grab your copy of coffees. So what I've done is I've selected the first 10 of them and I've pasted them in Visual Studio Code. And as you can see, I've got black coffee, latte, cappuccino, americano, etc. And I've got a total of 10. And I've got the description and the ingredients. So what we'll do is we'll create our objects. We'll initialize our coffee objects based on these coffees. Okay, so this is going to be a private list of coffee, if I can spell this right, called coffees, which is going to be a new list of coffee. And obviously this this particular class is not going to know about the namespace. So if we press Control Dot and import the shared project. And one other thing that we'd like to do is to, instead of doing new list of coffees, we are actually able to do in this version of C#, we are actually able to do just new open and close parentheses. So if we open up the curly braces, now in here, let's define our list of coffees. So if we do new, instead of doing new coffee, the compiler actually knows that this is a coffee, so we can just do new. And because of the fact that we've got a controller, we can actually do here, so what's the first parameter is the ID. So the ID being 1, and then the second one, actually I need to look in here, the title. So the title is, if we go back, the title is black. Yep. And then assuming this one is the description, and the description is this one. If I press Alt C, I can collapse everything. Actually, word wrap, that's called. Okay. And then the following parameter is the, it should be the ingredient. So this has just got like coffee as the ingredient. Yeah, okay. And to define, we need to actually define the a string array, and to do that we need to do new string array, and then in here we've got curly braces, and we paste in the ingredients, which in our case is just 1. Make sure that you add the semicolon at the end of the private list definition. And then what I will do is I'll basically copy and paste this for every single recipe that I've got on the list, so I don't bore you with typing this out. There we go. So we've got all 10 coffees that we've copied from that website. And following, what we'll need to do as part of this controller is to define 2 methods. Both represent the read part of the CRUD a set of endpoints of a regular API controller. So we do get and list, and the first one on our list is obviously get. So if we hit a couple of new lines, and then we'll do a public action result. So this is going to return an action result called get. and this is going to take in an ID, an integer type of ID. Yeah, and to make this an endpoint, we need to add the HTTP and then the action, the get. And then because this will take in an ID, we need to define the ID as part of the route, as part of the URL towards this endpoint. So if we open up the parentheses and then double quotes and then curly braces, and this is going to be this needs to match the position really of this ID. And then in here, let's declare a local variable called coffee. And then we do coffees. So we access this list of coffees dot find. And then in here we do object dot ID equals to the ID passed in. Okay. So let's check if the coffee is not null. In other words, if we have found the coffee, yeah, then return the coffee, but wrapped in an OK message, yeah, in an OK response. Otherwise, so this is just going to return it if successful. Otherwise, return not found. And it's optional, but you can also do like coffee not found. Okay, so this is it with the get method. The next one is the list one. So we can do public, this is even simpler than that, public action result. Yep, and then call it list. It doesn't take in any parameters and it just returns an OK response with the actual list of coffees. And that is it. And to qualify this as an endpoint, we need to still do it as a HTTP get. But because we've already got a get method as part of this controller, what we need to do is to give it a URL path as well. So this is going to be a list. So when we access this, we'll need to do coffee slash list, and then to access this, we can just do coffee and then slash and the coffee ID. Okay, following in our tutorial is to create the coffee dashboard component, and to do that we collapse everything and we go to coffeepicker.client. We open up the pages, right click on the pages, go to add, and then raise a component. And you can call this, I'm going to call it coffee dashboard. Just make sure you don't call it coffees or coffee list, so it doesn't conflict with any sort of variables, fields that we're going to create as part of this component. So coffee dashboard it is. Okay, and as we're here, we need to import a few things. So the first thing that we'll need to do is actually just define a page, which is lowercase page directive, and this is going to be /coffees, and then we'll need to inject the HTTP client, and this will be used to access those endpoints from the API controller. So HTTP client, yeah, and I'll call it HTTP client. This is just the name that we'll give it to it. Okay, and then last but not least, as part of the top part of this class, we'll add a using to the we'll add a reference to the coffee picker.shared project, so that we can access the coffee model. And hey, I just wanted to let you know that I do weekly tutorials just like this one, and if you do enjoy it, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any sort of content that I publish. I do appreciate it. Thank you. In order for this component to be found, we'll need to add it to the navigation bar. So we'll head over to the shared folder, and we'll open up the nav menu, and we'll just copy paste here from this section the new nav item, and I'll the href will point to the coffees route. Yeah, so as soon as we click this, it will point to the coffee dashboard page, and let's call this coffees. and let's give it an icon of OI basket. Cool, so we're all sorted. We can close out of this one. Let's add back in the title. That's going to be coffee dashboard, and let's run the application. And to run it, open up package manager console, and if you don't find it, just search for it in the top search bar, and make sure that your default project is set to coffeepicker.server. Yeah, and then type in .NET watch run, and then -p or -- project. It's the same thing, and this is going to be server. So the default project needs to be the server. So hit enter. And there you go, the app just started. If Google Chrome didn't already fire up this app for you, then make sure, actually if Visual Studio didn't do it for you, then make sure that you access localhost, and the port is 5001. So if we head head over to the coffees page, as you can see, we've accessed this page and it's empty. So this is where the fun starts. As part of the coffee dashboard, let's access that list of coffees from the coffees controller, which is here. So if we head to the coffees dashboard page, in here, let's define a private list of coffees. Yeah, and let's call this coffees, and let's new it out because we don't want an object reference exception. And in here, we can, as part of a Razor page, we can override a Blazor lifecycle method called onInitialized async. So to do that, we type in protected override, and then if we press space, we'll have a list of all the methods that we can override. So we'll need to override onInitialized async, and we've got the snippet generated for us, and I'm just going to make this async. Make sure that you type this async keyword in. Even if you don't use it, it'll throw an error if you don't have it. Okay, so in here, very, very simple, coffees. So we define the coffees private member that we've got here as the HttpClient .get from JSON asynchronous, and then we put in the type that we expect to receive, and this is going to be a list of coffees. So obviously what we return from the controller, and inside here we put in the route, the path, the URL to the endpoint. So this is going to be the coffee/list. So again, we make use of the HTTP client of the specifically we make use of the get from JSON async, because that's going to be sent as JSON, and then this is going to expect a list of coffees. And the URL is coffee/list. We obviously need to wait for this. This is why it's throwing an error. And then if we head over, if you remember, that's why I said the controller name is coffee, and then the endpoint is list. So that's how we access it. Okay, so getting back to the coffee dashboard page, let's save this so that hot reload will reload the page, and nothing really will change from a UI standpoint. And to see what we've got so far, to see if this works, let's actually go ahead and do a for each loop. So if you type in the @ sign and then for each, so for each coffee in our coffees list, let's actually wrap this in a UL real quick. Okay, so I wrap this in a UL, and then inside the for each I'm adding in a new list item. So for each coffee, go ahead and add a new list item. If we've got 10 coffees, which we do, we'll have 10 list items inside this UL tag, coffees. So I need to pluralize this, and then in here to access details about this coffee object in Blazor, we do add and then coffee, and then let's say if IntelliSense doesn't fire up, delete the point, delete the dot, and then type it in again. So let's add in the title, and let's save, and let's see what we've got. And there you go. This is what we've got. We've got a list of our coffees, but we need to make this more dynamic, obviously, because we need to show them as Bootstrap cards, and also we want to get their details, so we need to access the get method as well. So that's what we'll do next. Okay, so back in our project, let's remove all of these, and I'm just gonna add a basic container, a basic row with a couple of columns, and I'll explain that in a moment. Okay, so this is what we've got. We've got a row, yeah, a bootstrap row, and then we've got a couple of columns. So one stretches for like 75% of the screen, while the other one stretches for the rest of the 25%, something like that. So we've got this first container that will hold the list of bootstrap cards that we're going to be showing dynamically based on our list of coffees. And then here we'll populate at the end of the tutorial with details for each recipe that we select. So at the moment this doesn't look like much. So I just typed in details so you can see them side by side. So if I head over back to the website, as you can see, the coffees, this will hold the list of bootstrap cards with our coffees and some basic details. And then this will have the full-on details about the coffees when we're going to select them. So let's head over back to the project, and in here let's work on the very first part. So in here let's first check if we've got any coffees. So coffees, if coffees.any. So if we've got coffees, then go ahead and show them. Otherwise, let's make sure that we add this here. So add a paragraph, no coffees available, right? And then in here, it means if we reach this point, it means that we've got at least one coffee, right? So let's do a for each loop like we've done in the first part. Double tab, and then for each coffee in our coffees list. Yeah, and in here I'm gonna add a bootstrap card. Okay, so I've added a bootstrap card, a very basic one, taken straight from the documentation, that has got a body and a title, text as a paragraph, and a button that's going to access coffees, which is this particular page, so it doesn't navigate to anywhere. So in the title, let's think about it. What do we want to add? Let's add first the ID, I'm thinking, and the title as well. So let's add them side by side. So to do that, we'll need to add the add sign to access the to be able to insert razor syntax in here. So let's access the coffee object that's inside the loop dot, and let's put in the ID first, and then let's add in the coffee title. Yep, and let's add a pound sign here as well, or hashtag, or whatever we want to call this, so that this signifies an actual number. And then as the text, let's add here the coffee description. Coffee.description, and obviously I don't want to show the entire description, so let's just add a substring method, add a substring method to it, and I know for a fact that all the coffees that I have selected have got at least 80 characters, so I'm just going to do 0 and 80, and then add 3 dots to signify the fact that we've actually got more description to it. And then in here, in the anchor tag, we need to obviously let's give this a name of a value of more. Yeah, so that we can read more about this particular coffee. We can get the details, and then we'll need to add an on-click event. On-click, and then in here we open and close parentheses. This is going to signify an anonymous function, and then we type in get details. And we pass in the coffee.id. So this method doesn't exist yet. We'll create it in just a second. And what we're doing is when this anchor tag is clicked, then go ahead and fire up this get details method. By the way, how do you like working with Blazor so far? I think it's pretty cool. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below, or if you do have questions or suggestions, also comment down below and I'll make sure to respond to every single one of them. Let's comment out actually this particular button, and let's go ahead and access our page. So let's see what we've got. So there you go. I think it looks pretty cool, right? So we've got the ID, the title, and a part of the description. Obviously, this now reloads, but this is part of the description. So we've got all 10 recipes, and as soon as we add the button back in, because obviously we had to comment that out because it wouldn't have reloaded the page because this method doesn't exist. Let's actually create it. So if we go ahead and type a couple of new lines and do private, and this is going to be an asynchronous method with no return type, get details. Actually, I copied the name, and this is going to take in an integer of ID called ID, and opening close parentheses, fix the indentation, and then in order to be able to access this throughout the class, this recipe details, let's define a class level of a variable member here called selected coffee. So private of type coffee called selected coffee. And let's new this up as well. So this is why it was important to add a parameterless constructor to the coffee business model. Because we wouldn't have been able to initialize it as an empty coffee. So now what we can do in here is say selected coffee is equals to, and then await for this method as well. And then almost the exact same thing as we've done above on line 41. We do HttpClient.get from JSON asynchronous with the type of coffee. Yeah, and then inside here, and this is really cool, just coffee slash and then the ID. But this is obviously not going to work, so make sure that you add the $sign in front of it so that it escapes this curly braces, so that this is actually a variable, which is the parameter of this method. So that is it. If we save and we reload the page, as soon as this reloads, you'll see that we've got the more anchor tag on which we can actually click, and let's see if we open up the network tab of so the way I did that is I press Control Shift and I to open up the developer tools, and if we click more and take a look at this section right here from the network tab, which you can find right here, if I press on one of them, there you go. So it fired up an API endpoint, which is, it sent a GET request to an API endpoint. And this is what it looks like, coffee, and then the ID of 1. And this is what's returned back. The title, which is black, and it matches what we've got there. And then the description. And then if we reload the page, you'll actually see the list request as well. So this is the list request, and this is what it looks like. So coffee slash list, and then this is the list of 10 recipes that we've got so far. And if we press on one of them, that it'll send another GET request, and it will access a specific coffee provided the ID passed in. So this is what it looks like, and I think it's pretty cool that we can actually do that. So now that we know that we receive back that recipe, we can actually play around with this in the second section of this page, which is the details section. So I'm just gonna do this real quick, and then if we head over, what we want to show is obviously the full description of this and the ingredients, because nowhere on this page so far do we show the ingredients. So let's do that. First of all, in order to make sure that the app doesn't throw any errors, we need to check if the selected coffee is not null. And to do that, it is pretty simple. We do if selected coffee is not null, or better yet, the title is not null, because it will never be null because we actually initialize it here. However, the title will be null because we don't initialize the title by default. You can do this, or you can do string if I can actually type it, string is null or empty, and then type in the title. I think it serves the same purpose, so I'm just going to leave it as a string as selected coffee.title is not null. And then if it is null, sort of the same thing that we're doing here, but we can say no coffee selected, right? So that we know that nothing has been selected so far, and it's not an error that it doesn't show the details of that coffee. Okay, and then in here, really quickly, let's add a h3, and this is going to be the selected coffee.title, yeah, and then underneath let's add a paragraph that's going to be selected coffee.description, so the entire description, and then underneath the ingredients. I'm just going to type in ingredients, and then I'm going to show them as a simple bootstrap UL, and this is going to be, you guessed it, another for each loop. So for each ingredient in the selected coffee.ingredients, yeah, show a list item, but this needs to have a class of list group item, and then this will be the ingredient. Very important, if you're inside a HTML markup, make sure that you actually add the include the add sign before any sort of razor syntax, otherwise it's just going to consider it as a plain string. And if you hover over it, it'll actually say the type and the fact that it's a local variable. So if we save this and head over back to the page, and as soon as this reloads, you'll see this in action. Okay, so it reloaded. So let's choose a coffee, and if we click on this one, and as you can see on the right hand side, it just show the title, the description, and the ingredients. So if we select something else, there you go. This is doppio, this is the espresso, and so on and so forth. So I think it's pretty cool. Right, and that's it for today's tutorial. If you want to learn the basics of Blazor, check out this playlist where we'll create a recipe manager together. Until next time, stay safe.